So what is copyright infringement? Before we discuss what copyright infringement is, what is copyright? So copyright is basically when somebody creates his or her own original work and decides to place a particular set of rights upon it. These rights being that the creator has the sole right to distribute it, to copy it, to perform or display it in public, as well as create spin-offs, prequels, sequels, and other derivative works from that original work. So what then is copyright infringement? Copyright infringement is when somebody infringes on these rights of the owner, when somebody violates these rights. For example, when somebody decides to display this person's copyrighted work in public without his permission, or when somebody decides to copy and distribute it without, again, the author's permission, or he decides to create his own derivative work from that certain copyrighted object, again without the person's permission. What is key here is that the person does not have the author's permission, or an alternative would be that person is not committing fair use, or he is not following the guidelines of fair use. Here are just a few examples of how you can commit copyright infringement.
Right now, I'm listening to this one. I'm really playing this guy for his official video. And I'm going to upload it on YouTube, okay? So that audiences can decide whether or not they want to buy it or not based on what they hear.
Hey, it's him! You're under arrest for copyright infringement. For what? For what? With your hands, anything you say will be used against you.
But my what? My what? My what? Put my hands behind me.
Although the video is a slight exaggeration of what may happen, it shows what kind of repercussions may occur if ever we commit copyright infringement. And this does not just include getting arrested, but it may also have paying fines as high as $200, having privileges taken away from our accounts, as well as having our accounts banned altogether, all three of which may happen regularly. So how exactly can we stop this? How can we stop committing copyright infringement or avoid it altogether? One way would be to always ask the person for his or her permission to use the certain copyrighted content. Another way would be to follow the rights of fair use. But what exactly are the rules of fair use? So fair use is basically when somebody uses another person's copyrighted work, but it does not count as copyright infringement. This depends on fair use depends on four factors. One would be the purpose of why he's using the copyrighted work. Two would be the nature of the copyrighted work. Three would be how much of the copyrighted work he is using. And four would be the impact of what he does with the copyrighted work. So in the first one, there are three kinds of purposes. One being non-profit, profit, and transformative. While non-profit and profit are self-explanatory, transformative basically is when you decide to use the copyrighted product for a target market other than the original one. Like for example, when you use a scientific article in your fictional story about dragons and mafia, because instead of targeting the scientific market, you're targeting the fictional market. And in this guideline, you'd want to go use any purpose but profit, because profit, you're basically earning money for something you didn't even make, which under the law may be illegal. And then second is the nature of the work. Is it factual or is it creative? If it is factual, when you use a copyrighted work, it's not necessarily copyright infringement because you're using something that is regarded as a universal truth. But when you use a copyrighted work that's somebody else's idea, basically when you use creative work, it's like you're plagiarizing somebody else's idea or work for your own use, which is why you'd want to stick with factual. And then the third is how much of the work you're using. And this is pretty self-explanatory because the more of the copyrighted work you use, the more you can be suspected for copy and pasting. So you'd want to cut down and use the smallest amount possible for your whatever you are doing. And for number four, basically the impact of what you are doing. So the impact on the commercial market and the impact on the value of the copyrighted work. And basically here, you'd want to make sure that what you're doing is making the smallest impact possible, because you're barely affecting anything in this case, which would make your work seem more safe or more detached from basically what the original work is affecting. So in short, in order to avoid copyright infringement, we must always ask permission and follow the guidelines of fair use. So use the work for the right reasons and target a different audience if needed. We must also check the nature of the work to know what we're getting into and use as little of the work as possible to prevent it from being called copy and pasting. And aside from that, we must keep the impact to a minimum. Thank you for watching, and always remember to follow the proper guidelines and always ask permission.